Hello, fellow resistors. Welcome to Political Reprobate, the show about how we survive and fight back in the age of white nationalist Christo-fascism. I'm Gemma, former Republican political operative, current political reprobate, and this is a daily podcast about how power really works in America and how we the people can take it back. This podcast exists for one reason: to help you understand what is actually happening in the country so you can resist it intelligently. Subscribe, like, and join the fight. It's become more and more clear to me in the last 10 years or so that there are a lot of rich tech types in America who think democracy is a bug, not a feature. And one of the most influential of those people is Peter Thiel. And if you're thinking, who the fuck is Peter Thiel? It's good that we're having this conversation. We're going to talk about who Peter Thiel is, how he basically incubated the political career of the fascist vice president, why Silicon Valley billionaires suddenly seem very interested in building private cities, and what that means for things like rights, liberty, and not being owned by a tech oligarch like a goddamn company asset. Because, spoiler alert, if billionaires get the political system they seem to want, you're not going to be a citizen. You're going to be something closer to an employee of the city you live in. And the word employee is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. If that sounds insane, buckle up, because the people pushing these ideas are already funding politicians and have been for some time. Oh, and yeah, of course, there will be swearing, because talking about billionaires trying to redesign society like it's a fucking startup pitch deck requires it. So we'll start with Peter Thiel. Thiel is a tech billionaire, and fun fact, an immigrant. Yeah, odd how the fascist fuckstains don't seem to mind immigrants when they're white, huh? He's a co-founder of PayPal, an early investor in Facebook, and he's worth several $billion, which means he has the kind of fuck you money where if he loses a cool 50 mil, he probably just shrugs and orders another yacht. But Thiel isn't just another rich tech guy who puts his names on buildings and builds weird postmodern houses. He has very specific political ideas, and those ideas include this little gem he wrote back in 2009. I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. Side note, when these billionaire fuckwads talk about freedom, they aren't talking about it in the way we think about it. They mean freedom from taxes, from accountability, from consequences. Anyway, I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible is the kind of sentence that should make every American say, hold the fuck up. Maybe we shouldn't give this motherfucker the keys to redesigning society, which is exactly what this fuckstick wants to do. But Silicon Valley heard that sentence and apparently said, interesting. Please tell us more. Because in the tech billionaire ecosystem, democracy is often seen as a bug in the system, a problem, an obstacle. Too many voters, too many rules, too many regulators asking annoying questions like, should tech monopolies control half the economy? So some of these guys, with Thiel as their fucking ringleader, have started fantasizing about alternatives. Startup nations, network states, private cities, which maybe just sounds futuristic until you realize it's basically the political system of the Middle Ages with better branding. By the way, we'll talk a lot more about these fucking private cities another time. But now, let's talk about the political side of this, and specifically JD Vance. You know JD, infamous couch fucker, eyeliner model, potato-faced sycophant of the orange diaper shitter. And while we're on the subject, this motherfucker has changed his name at least 3 times. True, but Jimmy Don Bowman can't fucking respect people's preferred names. Fucking hypocrite piece of shit. But I digress. Couch fucker didn't just appear in politics. He was basically venture capitaled into the political scene. If you were to go into the Wayback Machine, the Vance from a few years back would look and sound way fucking different. He came to public light when he wrote Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir about growing up in Appalachia. Some of it might have even actually been true. The book got massive attention from media and political elites because it told a story they liked. That poverty in rural America was mostly about culture rather than the natural consequences of decades of economic hostage-taking. The book made Vance kind of sort of famous. Famous enough that there was an awful Netflix movie made about the book. But politically, he was a fucking mess. At one point, he was openly critical of Trump, called him America's Hitler. Yeah, no shit. which in modern Republican politics is roughly equivalent to announcing you enjoy setting your career on fire. Enter Peter Thiel. Thiel looked at Vance and saw something venture capitalists love: a scalable product. Seriously, if you look at how Thiel backed Vance's Ohio Senate campaign, it looks exactly like a startup investment. Massive funding, strategic support, connections to donor networks, media amplification. Thiel dumped millions into Vance's campaign. And suddenly, this relatively unknown author and talk show buffoon grew a beard and became Senator JD fucking Vance. So, insider tip: money doesn't guarantee victory, but it absolutely helps create political candidates and gets our message in the heads of voters, especially when that money comes with an entire ecosystem of donors, media allies, and political infrastructure. In other words, JD Vance was a fucking venture capitalist political project. Now, here's where things get interesting. JD presents himself as a populist champion of working class Americans, but politically, he's deeply connected to Silicon Valley billionaire money. And if you're not scared shitless by that idea yet, please watch my other podcast episodes. The political connection exists because Vance is ideologically aligned, or pretends to be, with the Thiel wing of tech politics. That's the wing that believes that democracy is inefficient and that government regulation prevents people who are fuck you rich from becoming fuck everyone rich. They think technological elites should have more power shaping society because they fancy themselves as being smarter than the rest of us. And strong leaders are better than messy democratic institutions. Am I right? Jesus fucking Christ with these people. And as we've talked about before, that worldview overlaps cleanly with authoritarian politics. Strong leader, weak institutions, power concentrated in the hands of a small elite. Which brings us to the real fucked up part of this story. Some of the same tech billionaires funding right-wing politics are also investing in ideas like private cities, charter communities, network states. Now, on paper, these ideas sound like cool futuristic experiments, but let's translate them into reality. A private city is basically a place where a corporation or billionaire controls the government, where they are the government, where they control the rules, the infrastructure, the economic system, even the legal framework. If that sounds familiar, you must know your history, because that's basically how company towns worked in the 19th century. Coal companies owned the town, the housing, the stores, the police, and guess what? Workers had absolutely no fucking rights, because the people who owned the town also controlled the power structure. And life in these towns fucking sucked. People worked ridiculous hours in horrible conditions and kept falling further into debt because the company owned everything. Things people needed were sold to them at ridiculous prices, on credit, or using something called scrip. Yeah, people weren't even paid with real money, so they couldn't leave town. And they never made enough to meet their ever and ever larger debts. Now, imagine that model updated for the tech era. Instead of coal companies, you have billionaire oligarchs. Instead of mining towns, you have private cities. And instead of citizens, you have residents who exist inside a system designed by billionaires to extract every bit of value from you, then cast you aside. Let's call this dumb fuckery what it actually is: techno-feudalism. In medieval feudal systems, landowners controlled territory. Peasants lived on that land and worked under the authority of the lord. The lord controlled the rules, the courts, the economic system. Now imagine the same structure but run by tech billionaires. You live in a city run by a corporation. Everything, housing, healthcare, if there is any, everything is tied to your job, and you're only useful as long as you can be more productive than you were the day before. The infrastructure is privately owned. The legal system is privatized and exists only to serve the interest of the corporation. And political decisions are made by, you guessed it, the billionaires who own the city. Congratulations, you're no longer a citizen. You're a user in someone's fucked up operating system. And if you don't like the rules, well, good fucking luck. Just like in the company coal towns, you can't go anywhere because the entire ecosystem is controlled by the same fucking economic elite. Now let's talk about rights. Yeah, you've probably guessed it. What fucking rights? Because this is where the whole idea gets really scary. In democratic systems, rights exist because the system recognizes them as foundational. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, labor protections, voting rights. Now, imagine living in a privately governed city. What happens if the corporation running the city decides protests are bad for business? What happens if union organizing interferes with corporate profits? What happens if the billionaire running the city decides certain political speech is unacceptable? You don't have to imagine any of that because none of it would fucking be allowed. Nothing exists in the infrastructure to ensure that human rights, or indeed human life, are protected. And once legal and political oversight disappears, power tends to concentrate, which is exactly what oligarchs prefer. And if you think all of this is trying to sound like the dystopian cyberpunk bullshit I promised you we weren't going to focus on, it kind of is. But it isn't fiction. This is actually Peter Thiel's vision for the future. Peter Thiel and many of his contemporaries want us mere mudsills actually to live our lives like this. But I am going to live up to my promise that this is not what our future is going to be about, because we, the people, cannot let these motherfuckers win. As we talked about before, there's this fucked up coalition forming in American politics. On one side, you have the Christo-fascist motherfuckers that want a more authoritarian, religiously dominated political system. These are the asshole Project 2025 fucksticks now infesting the government. On the other side, you have tech billionaire motherfuckers, so many people fucking their moms, who want a more elite-driven corporate governance system. Culturally, these groups might hate each other, but politically, they share a goal: destroying democracy. Because the more democracy weakens, the more power gets redistributed. And whoever has the most money, influence, and organization tends to win that power struggle. Spoiler alert, it's never the working or middle classes. Look, in all the time I spent working in politics, I've learned to understand conservative ideology. But the current political environment is different. We're seeing an alliance between right-wing populist politics, Christian nationalist movements, and segments of the tech billionaire class that openly question and want to destroy democracy. That combination is volatile because it mixes mass political energy with enormous, and I mean fucking unbelievably enormous, financial power. Again, these motherfuckers have more money than a lot of countries. And when those forces align, democratic systems can get very fragile very quickly. Now, of course, Peter Thiel is not the only billionaire asshole pushing these ideas, but he's one of the clearest examples of how tech money is shaping politics in the now times. Funding candidates, promoting anti-democratic ideas, experimenting with governance models that look exactly like corporate rule. And when billionaires start talking about replacing democratic systems with something more efficient, you can safely assume that zero fucks are being given about human rights. Stay loud, stay skeptical. And if anyone tells you democracy is outdated, remind those fuckstains that Americans already fought one revolution against rich assholes who cared fuck all about human rights. And we can do it again. I'm Gemma, former Republican political operative, current political reprobate. Join me. We're just getting started.